Welcome to Bundesliga Chat Time from We Are Soccer. I'm your host, Craig Hearn, and I'm joined, as usual, by our German soccer expert, Nate Janulis. Nate, today we'll be chatting about Jesse Marsch being fired from RB Leipzig, what went down there, and where he could potentially end up at. We'll also chat about some of the structure within a German club and how it's different from a lot of the clubs and leagues in the rest of the world. I love the festive hat you've come with, Nate. Why don't you show us what? Oh, Stuttgart. Everything leads back to Stuttgart. I love it, man.
It all leads back to Stuttgart. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. I love it. We're still a couple of weeks out from Christmas, but I do like where we're going.
It's December. It's all the Christmas.
Yeah. So, all right, the big news that came out this week, Jesse Marsch at Leipzig's been let go. He was fired. He finished his up officially at Leipzig with a record of 7 wins, 4 draws, and 6 losses. Is this just another example of another American not being able to cut it outside of the MLS? Or is there a little bit of bad luck played in here? What's your thoughts on this, my friend?
Well, I think there could be a bit of bad luck. I get it. I think we've talked about it before that this was going to be a possibility. Rumor has it is that basically on the inside he was told win out the rest of the year before the Union game, and that didn't work out for him, obviously, and then that was the most back there. He did some good things there. You can question whether or not he had the time. And we'll get into that as far as the structure goes. It's a little bit different than Premier League. It's a little bit different than a lot of other leagues, the way the Bundesliga works with the sporting director and actually the coach and what they're supposed to be doing. And we'll jump into that. I think the problem was the expectation was he came from the Leipzig system. He was groomed through the Leipzig system. He knew the system. He had players. They spent a lot of money, and I think the Red Bulls organization expected to be basically within top 4 battle, not outside that top 4, which they've been in that battle for the last few years.
Yep.
Combine that with early Champions League exit, and it's basically all she wrote,
Yeah, I mean, officially, he's left now this week, as we said. He's left Leipzig in 11th position, 11th spot in the Bundesliga. They had a +7 goal difference, so it's not been terrible. But the win, you're right. I think the wins were expected by the executives and the owners. It hasn't been there. Officially, they had 5 wins out of 14 in the Bundesliga in league play. So, yeah, they find themselves in 11th and technically outside of the top 4 by 7 points after 14 games. But again, we always say that a new coach needs time to groom his players into what he wants as a tactic and how on the schemes that he has. It just didn't seem like he was given enough time with this.
So that's where the misconception is, and actually where you got to kind of look at it and say, no, it's different here. In that he came from Leipzig, he came from the system that they were running. The way Germany works is they got, basically a sporting director, which is a guy who is not like an Ed Woodward, not like a business guy, not there for financials and just to do transfer deals. It's usually a former player, a former coach. Ralph Ragnick was basically, that's what he's been doing the last few years as a sporting director. And their job is not to bring in a coach to implement a system and bring to then coach the system that's already there with that. So that's why he's such an actual high turnover with coaches. I mean, we're on the third coach, I think, to be fired already this year. Harther let go of their coach. Wolfsburg let go to theirs, and now Leipzig let go of theirs. And again, that's where the expectation is you're supposed to be coming in. You have the system. They're hiring you not to implement a system. They're not hiring you to come up with a system. They already have one. So through the interview process, I would imagine that they're asking the questions and talking about, like, these are the players we have. This is how we want to play. This is how we want to go. what are you planning to bring to the table? How do you plan on executing it? And when the execution isn't there, then they get let go. So you take another team like Leverkusen. Leverkusen brought in came from Young Boy there. He was known as an attacking coach. He was known as, a team that likes to go forward and quickly go forward. And Leverkusen brought him in. They said, "Hey, these are with who we have and the players we have. This is what we want to do. This is how we want to go forward." And if you look at them this year, they've been exceptional going forward. Score a ton of goals. Many of their players are having what you could call like a career year right now, the way they're playing and the goals they're scoring. And like players like Floyd and Wirtz are really excelling, really doing well. So that's stuff. That's where you can say that you brought in a coach, you implemented a system that you wanted to play, and it's working. And the problem with Marsch, right, wrong, or indifferent, who knows what's going on in the locker rooms, who knows why it didn't work out, but they had a decent amount of players in, they had a system they want to run. He was already coming from basically the Austrian side of Red Bulls, and it wasn't working. All their players took a step back. Silva, who was third in scoring, who they bought for 44 million this year, took a massive step back, and he's only had a few goals and was struggling. And everyone across the board, it seems like the whole team has regressed. So from that aspect, I do understand why he was let go. Whether it's all his fault or not, I'm not saying it is. But when you look at what was supposed to happen, it just wasn't.
It is a little bit of a difference within the Bundesliga, the way they do that. And I'm noticing a trend now because there's a lot of teams around the world that are starting to do this. One of them, obviously, Man United, hiring Ralph Rangnick. He's taking over currently as the interim coach, and his title is interim coach. From there, he's going to move upstairs to be the sporting director, and he's going to start implementing his style of play as he's done at RB Leipzig, as he did at Leipzig, right? He was the one who kind of implemented that, and he brought in the coaches, and there's a coaching tree under him of people that have coached and have now gone on to take this. Did RB Leipzig, maybe when he left, shift to a different sporting director and the tactics shifted and they were just kind of moving Marsch around where they expected him to do something differently? I don't know if we'll know if he was expected to do something differently or if he just kept trying to do the same thing and it wasn't working. But it is interesting that the philosophy that has come out of Germany with the sporting director, who is a former player, there's a lot of former players who've moved up into that role, and they are the ones responsible for putting those that style and tactics into play, not just with the first team, right? So it's that sporting director putting the style of play into the first team, the reserve team, and every single team down all the way to the youth teams, right? It's a style of play that they all must learn how to play because the idea is to groom those players and coaches up into the first team. So when this started to come about a couple of years ago, I thought this is silly. This is ludicrous. But the more you read about it, the more you think about it, this is genius. It's absolutely genius.
And there's pros and cons to it. So, right, wrong, or different. I'm not saying which is better, which isn't. It just is, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I guess you could say the pros is, unlike in the Premier League, if your coach or your system isn't working, you have to fire the guy, you're basically starting all over. You have teams like Man United, who's been perpetually starting over every 2-3 years. It's just not working. You got other teams where that's the same thing. They're getting rid of their coaches. They're basically starting over, having to start anew. Where this is more of a long-term, I guess you could say, forward outlook of, hey, here's where we're at. This is where we want to go. And if he fires, if he moves on, and that's happened in Germany. You see a lot of, look at a lot of the top Premier League coaches. Many of them have come from Bundesliga teams right now. So they move on. You're not starting over. You still have that consistency of what's going on. Now, you can then argue, well, you're not getting the most out of your coach. Maybe the coach wants to come in and put his stamp on the team. But that's where it's important for the sporting director to know who he's hiring and to make sure he's hiring a guy that fits into the philosophy and sees eye to eye. So it's a bit different. It's a bit different than what they do in the Premier League, where you got your some of these club directors who aren't football guys, who are more business guys, dollar and cents, working transfers, this and that, and following the lead of whatever the manager wants to get in, where now it's just separated. And there's longevity there, but they got board of directors that are above the sporting director, and they determine whether or not the direction is the right or wrong. So it's not like he has all autonomy, and often, and it's different dynamics. It depends. Munich is known for their board actually to have more power a bit and be a little bit more involved than the sporting director at times, and sometimes override things. So, it's there. I mean, it is what it is. But that's basically what happened. If you look at who they brought in, or how much players they spent, you want to throw out a number of how much maybe they spent since March in the transfer market?
I mean, from what I remember, it's not a ton. I wouldn't think you're going into the tens of millions, but I'm assuming by the way you're looking at me now, you're going to say it's a really big number. What do we got?
107. They bought 100. They spent 117 million since March.
Holy moly!
So that's what I'm saying. They bought a significant amount of players. They bought 5 players, 4 defenders. 3 of the basically have not been playing.
Right.
Silva, the striker, it was 44 minutes, so he's over half of it, and he's been relegated to the bench. He hasn't been doing that well, but again, he was number 3 in goal scoring with Frankfurt within the Bundesliga last year. Morbia from Barcelona, they bought for 18 million. Godalvo, 21 million. Hendricks, 17 million. And Smaka for 17 million. So they bought some players. I know they're not like name brand high marquee players, but it's kind of what the Bundesliga does anyways. But they spent a significant amount of money, even though they lost Makendo, and moved on from their attacking midfielder there. They spent a lot of money to kind of sort that up and spread that in, and that's not even including what they spent in February and January during that transfer market, which I think if you add those players in, you're up to about 200 million. So it's not like they haven't been spending money, and the expectation there was not to be in 11th and not be out of not to be out of. I mean, there's some stuff as far as what Marsch did. I mean, there is some definite stuff he did good. He beat Dortmund. He tied PSG. He beat Bruges once. He punted Hertha 6-0. He punted Stuttgart 6-0 or 4-0. The problem is his losses against Mainz 1-0, Wolfsburg, his 6-3 shambling against City, and I think that 6-3 when they just got worked like that against City, I think that's really when red flags started to go, because that was a bad game. Yep. Tying against Frankfurt, losing losing against Union, losing. They're still in the Pokal. They're hopefully, or they probably will be in the Europa, because they got to go through that qualification. But I would expect them to still be in it. And they're in a position where they can work their way up the table. So it's not doom and gloom, but I think the sporting director and the board just pushed into an area. All right, if we don't do something now, we have 3 games prior to win break. Gladbach, Augsburg, and Bielefeld. All 3 should be ready. You're probably not looking too bad in the table. You go into next year on a little bit of a win streak. You got an easy Pokal match. You relevant, have another cup. So it's not doom and gloom, but they unfortunately the action there, amount of money on when you I believe same sporting director was there last year, where their system isn't the issue. The players key the issue. Unfortunately, the coach is going to get the brunt of that at the end of the day.
It's always the coach. When the team's not playing well, when something goes wrong, it's always the coach who falls on.
Especially in the Bundesliga, and especially with this team. Again, when you put the whole story together, coming from Salzburg, Red Bull's guy, system guy, sporting director system, team that was competing for second, team that spent 117 million bringing players in. It's the expectation there was not to be 11th. So now, as for him and what his future holds, who knows? I hope there's something internationally for him. I do like him. I think he is a good coach. I think there was signs of things that were really good as far as the way they were playing at times. At times it was working, at times it wasn't. Who knows the reason for that? Some of that could be just internal locker room, blah, blah. So I would hope that he could land another job either back in Austria or maybe somewhere else in the Bundesliga. I mean, there's always the MLS, right? But I hate to say it like that, but with his resume, I think that's a step backwards at his age. There are some other American coaches floating around, and you had the news that Raniak just picked up former, and that's good news. So at least there are some bright sides to the American coaching program. Unfortunately, I think this was just a bit of a blemish.
No, I agree, and it's going to be interesting to see where he lands. Hopefully, it is somewhere in Europe or it's somewhere out, outside of the MLS. But he did coach or manage in the MLS for 7 years with the Impact and Red Bulls. So that's always there's some openings there if he needs to come back here and manage here. But hopefully it's somewhere out in Europe and he can get some more experience and grow, because I do think he could be a good manager. He's only 48 years old, so he's got a lot of learning to do. That's young for a manager. We'll see where he ends up.
He pulled a double with Salzburg and won a league title the year prior, so it's not like he hasn't done well within European football. So it just depends on where he goes. And maybe this was just too big of a jump. I don't know. Maybe with the circumstances, it was almost a setup to fail. I don't know. Time will tell.
We'll keep our eyes on it. All right, Nate. Thanks for joining. Merry Christmas. It's a little early, but you and your Stuttgart Santa hat, I love it. Thanks again, buddy, and we'll chat on Bundesliga Chat Time next week. Cheers, bud.
Pros.